He escaped from the orphanage and ran to the cemetery. As he wept at his mother's grave, something miraculous happened that would change his life forever. Watch this touching story of redemption, love, and hope that you can't miss. Peter woke up early that morning, the rays of the sun invading his small room through the partially open window. He loved mornings, especially those he could spend with his mother, Maria. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the smell of pancakes was an irresistible invitation to start the day with a smile. "Good morning, my love," Maria said as she saw Peter enter the kitchen, rubbing his still sleepy eyes. "Good morning, Mom," he replied, hugging her tightly. Maria was a dedicated nurse who worked long hours at the hospital, but she always found time to be with Peter. However, that day she seemed more tired than usual, her smile still present but her eyes revealing deep exhaustion. Over the weeks, Maria began to feel constant pain and a fatigue that seemed never to go away. Initially, she attributed it to intense work and lack of rest. However, the symptoms intensified, and she decided to seek medical help. Peter, although young, noticed that something was wrong. He observed how his mother spent more and more time lying down, as if her energy had been drained from her body. One night, he found her sitting at the kitchen table, head down and tears streaming down her face. "Mom, what's wrong?" he asked, worried. "I'm just tired, dear," she replied, trying to hide the truth. But Peter knew it was something more. Days turned into weeks, and Maria underwent a series of tests at the hospital where she worked. The diagnosis was devastating. She had a terminal illness. The doctors were straightforward. There was not much to be done, only palliative care to alleviate the pain. Maria decided not to tell Peter immediately. She wanted him to enjoy every moment without the shadow of the disease hanging over their heads. However, as her condition worsened, she realized she needed to prepare him. One afternoon, sitting in the park they often visited, Maria decided to tell Peter the truth. The sun was setting, and the elongated shadows of the trees created a melancholic atmosphere. "Peter, I need to tell you something important," Maria began, her voice soft and laden with emotion. "I'm very sick, my love, and I won't be here for much longer." Peter looked at her, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and incomprehension. "What do you mean, Mom? You're going to get better, aren't you?" Maria pulled Peter into a tight hug, trying to hold back her tears. "I wish I could say yes, dear, but sometimes things don't happen the way we want. I want you to know that I'll always be with you, even when I can't be here anymore." Over time, Maria grew weaker. Peter spent every possible moment by her side, holding her hand, talking, trying to make her smile. The days passed in a blur, and the inevitable farewell arrived. That morning, the hospital was quiet. Peter held his mother's hand, feeling the weakness in her grip. Maria opened her eyes and tried to smile. "I love you so much, Peter. Be strong, my love," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I love you too, Mom. I will always love you," Peter replied, tears falling freely. Maria closed her eyes for the last time, and Peter felt as if the entire world had stopped. He was alone, lost in a pain that seemed endless. After his mother's death, Peter was taken to the hospital, where he was cared for by the nurses who had been Maria's colleagues. However, it was necessary to decide the boy's future, and soon the social workers were called in. Peter sat in a small, cold room at the hospital, waiting to find out what would happen to him. His eyes were red from crying, and his heart felt heavy. He clutched a photo of his mother, his last connection to the happy past he had known. A middle-aged woman with a kind face entered the room. She introduced herself as Mrs. Martinez, a social worker. She sat beside Peter, offering him an encouraging smile. "Hello, Peter. I'm Mrs. Martinez. I know this is very difficult for you, and I'm very sorry for your loss. I'm here to help find a safe place for you to stay, she began, her voice soft and comforting. Will I go back home? Peter asked, his voice full of hope and fear. Mrs. Martinez took a deep breath before answering. Unfortunately, Peter, we can't go back home now. We need to find a place where you can stay and be cared for. I know it's a lot to understand right now, but we will take care of you. Peter lowered his head, feeling the tears threaten to fall again. I don't have anyone else. I only had Mom. Mrs. Martinez held Peter's hand, trying to convey some warmth and comfort. I understand, Peter. They told me you never met your father and that we don't have records of any living relatives on your mother's side. But that doesn't mean you'll be alone. There are many good people who care about you and want to help. Another social worker, Mr. Johnson, entered the room. He was a tall man with gray hair and a serious but friendly expression. He sat in front of Peter, clasping his hands. Hello, Peter. I'm Mr. Johnson. We're here to make sure you're well cared for and safe. I know it seems scary now, but I want you to know that many children have gone through this and found new families and new friends. Peter looked at Mr. Johnson, trying to find some hope in his words. Will I find a new family? Yes, Peter, that's our hope. We work hard to find loving homes for children like you. In the meantime, you'll stay in a place where there are other children, an orphanage. There, you'll have the chance to make new friends and live in a safe environment, Mr. Johnson explained. Mrs. Martinez continued, the orphanage may seem scary at first, but it's a place where many children find comfort and friendship. You'll meet people who have gone through similar things and who can understand you, and we will keep looking for a family for you. Peter wiped away the tears and tried to smile. He wanted to believe in the adults who seemed so confident. He wanted to believe that he could be happy again. You're a strong boy, Peter, and we will do everything we can to make sure you find a new family. In the meantime, think of the orphanage as a new beginning, an opportunity to make new friends and have new experiences, Mrs. Martinez said, squeezing his hand gently. The ride to the orphanage was quiet. Peter looked out the car window, watching the city pass by in a blur. He thought about Mrs. Martinez and Mr. Johnson's words, trying to hold on to the hope they had offered. He wanted to believe that he would find friends and eventually a new family who loved him as much as his mother had. Upon arriving at the orphanage, Peter was greeted by a caregiver named Miss Elena, who guided him to his new room. It was small but clean and organized. She showed him where he could store his things and introduced him to some children playing in the courtyard. Everything will be all right, Peter. This is a safe place, and we're all here to help you, said Miss Elena with an encouraging smile. Peter tried to smile back. He knew it would be difficult, but he decided to believe in the promise that he could find friends and eventually a new family. He placed the photo of his mother under the pillow and prepared to face this new chapter of his life filled with hope. Peter woke up in the orphanage with a mixed feeling of curiosity and fear. The room was small but clean, and he could hear the voices of other children outside playing in the courtyard. The photo of his mother was hidden under his pillow, his only comfort in a world that seemed increasingly strange and lonely. In the first few days, Peter tried to adapt to the new routine. Mrs. Violet, the caregiver, was kind and tried to make him feel at home. Good morning, Peter. Ready for breakfast? She asked with a warm smile. Peter nodded timidly and followed Mrs. Violet to the dining hall. The children sat at long tables, chatting and laughing. Peter sat in a corner, observing them. Hi, I'm Lisa, said a girl with curly hair, extending her hand. You're new here, right? Yes, I'm Peter, he replied, shaking her hand. Lisa smiled and started talking about school and the games in the courtyard. For a moment, Peter felt a spark of hope that he could make friends there. However, reality soon proved different. During a game in the courtyard, an older boy named Tommy approached Peter. Hey, new kid, Tommy shouted. Do you think you can just come here and fit in? Peter tried to ignore him, but Tommy pushed him, making him fall to the ground. The other children laughed, and Peter felt the tears beginning to form. "Leave him alone," shouted Lisa, but Tommy just laughed and walked away, leaving Peter on the ground, humiliated. Days turned into weeks, and Peter began to realize that the orphanage was not the welcoming place Mrs. Martinez and Mr. Johnson had described. He faced constant bullying from Tommy and his friends, and even Lisa, who tried to defend him, couldn't always be around. Peter began to isolate himself, preferring to stay in the room with the photo of his mother. Meals were a torment, and he avoided the courtyard where Tommy and his followers pursued him. The promises of friendship and comfort seemed increasingly distant, and Peter felt his hope diminishing each day. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult day, Peter was in the courtyard trying to play alone. Tommy and his friends approached again, ready to torment him. Peter felt a panic wash over him. "What's wrong, new kid? Gonna cry again?" Tommy teased while the others laughed. Peter couldn't take it anymore. He looked around, seeing a small opening in the courtyard fence. Without thinking twice, he ran. He ran with all his might, hearing the shouts and laughter of Tommy in the distance. He didn't look back. He ran through the streets, guided by the only landmark he remembered: the city clock tower, which was near the cemetery where his mother was buried. He ran until his legs hurt, passing through parks, busy streets, and familiar corners. Finally, exhausted, Peter arrived at the cemetery. He found his way to his mother's grave, his heart heavy and tears ready to fall. He knelt before the headstone, letting his emotions take over. "Mom, I can't take it anymore. Please, take me with you," he sobbed, his voice choked. Suddenly, Peter felt a hand touch his shoulder. He froze, tears still streaming down his face, and turned slowly. Peter turned slowly when he felt the hand on his shoulder. He looked up and saw a woman with sad eyes and a gentle smile. "Hello," she said softly. "I'm Anne. Are you okay?" Peter tried to hold back the tears, but it was impossible. He shook his head and let the crying come, and knelt beside him and, without saying anything, hugged him. It was a simple gesture but full of understanding and empathy. I just wanted to be with my mom again," Peter murmured, his voice trembling. "I understand, Peter," Anne replied, still holding him. "I miss someone very special too." After a few moments, Anne helped Peter to his feet. They walked together to a nearby bench, where they sat to talk a bit more. Anne offered a snack from her bag, and Peter accepted, realizing he was hungry. They spent some time in silence, just appreciating each other's company, and then suggested a walk in the park next to the cemetery. "Shall we walk a bit?" she asked, trying to ease the tension. "There's a swing there that's perfect for playing." Peter nodded, feeling a bit lighter. They walked to the park, where Anne pushed Peter on the swing, and for a moment, he managed to forget his sadness. Peter's spontaneous laughter filled the air, and Anne felt an unexpected joy seeing the boy having fun. After a while, they sat under a tree. Peter looked at Anne curiously. "Who were you visiting in the cemetery?" he asked softly, full of empathy, and sighed, looking into the distance. "I was visiting my son, Michael. He would be your age today." Peter was silent, absorbing the information. What happened to him? He got sick. It happened very quickly. There wasn't much the doctors could do, Anne replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Peter felt a deep connection with Anne. "I'm so sorry, Anne. It must be very hard." "It is, Peter. But you know, remembering him and talking about him helps keep his memory alive. He was a wonderful boy, full of life. I think he would have liked to meet you." They stayed silent for a moment, sharing the pain and comfort their losses brought, and looked at Peter with eyes full of understanding. "You know, Peter, sometimes life throws challenges our way that seem insurmountable, but you're strong. I see that in you." And even when it seems impossible, you can find a way to move forward. Peter thought about Anne's words. He felt a new strength growing inside him, a will to face his fears and try to make things work, even at the orphanage. Thank you, Anne. I think I'll go back to the orphanage now, Peter said with renewed determination, and smiled, feeling proud of the little boy beside her. You'll be okay, Peter, and I'll be around. We'll find a way to get through this together. She accompanied Peter back to the orphanage, holding his hand the whole time. When they arrived, Miss Violet was at the door with a worried expression that eased when she saw Peter. Peter, thank goodness you're safe. We were so worried, she exclaimed, kneeling to hug him. Peter looked at, and one last time before going in, I'll be okay, I promise, and nodded, holding back tears. Remember what we talked about, Peter. You're stronger than you think. Peter entered the orphanage feeling different, stronger. He knew he would still face challenges, but now he had something he didn't have before, hope, and returned home after leaving Peter at the orphanage, feeling a mix of sadness and hope. Her conversation with Peter made her think about Michael more than ever. That night, she sat with her husband, John, in the kitchen as they prepared dinner. How was your day, Anne? John asked, noticing a different expression on her face. It was interesting. I met a boy at the cemetery, Peter. He was so lost and sad, and we ended up spending some time together. It was good, you know? Helping him made me feel a bit happier, and said with a soft smile. John smiled, happy to see a sparkle in Anne's eyes that he hadn't seen in a long time. I'm glad to hear that. Sometimes helping others really helps us too. Meanwhile, at the orphanage, Peter woke up the next morning with a different feeling. There was something inside him, a flame of hope lit by Anne's words. He knew he would still face difficulties, but felt more prepared to deal with them. During breakfast, Peter found Lisa, who seemed sad and worried. Good morning, Lisa, he said, trying to cheer her up. Good morning, Peter, she replied without enthusiasm. What happened? You seem sad. I'm worried. I heard a family is coming today to meet some children. What if no one likes me? Lisa said, her eyes filling with tears. Peter remembered Anne's words and decided to share them with Lisa. You know, Lisa, yesterday I met a very special woman at the cemetery. She lost her son, and even so, she found the strength to help me. She said sometimes life puts challenges in our way that seem insurmountable, but we're stronger than we think. You're an amazing person, Lisa. Any family would be lucky to have you. Lisa looked at Peter, surprised and touched by his words. Thank you, Peter. I think I needed to hear that. You're an amazing friend. Peter smiled, feeling more confident. And no matter what happens, I'll be here for you. Later that day, the expectation and anxiety were palpable in the orphanage. The children were nervous, getting ready, and trying to present themselves in the best way possible. When the family arrived, Peter watched from afar as they talked to several children, including Lisa. Peter felt anxious for her, but held on to hope. He knew Lisa was special and deserved a loving family. When the family finally chose Lisa for adoption, she ran to Peter with tears in her eyes, but a big smile on her face. They chose me, Peter, she exclaimed, hugging him tightly. Peter felt a mix of emotions, knowing he would miss his friend, but also feeling immense happiness for her. I'm so happy for you, Lisa. You deserve this. Be happy, okay? He said with a genuine smile. I will, and I'll miss you a lot, Lisa replied, holding back tears. The following days were difficult for Peter. He felt Lisa's absence and still faced bullying from Tommy and his friends. However, something inside him had changed. He remembered Anne's words and the advice he had given Lisa. He knew that despite the challenges, he had the strength to move forward. One afternoon, while he was in the courtyard, Tommy and his friends approached again. Hey, new kid, What are you gonna do now that your little friend is gone?" Tommy taunted. Peter took a deep breath, remembering the strength he had found within himself. "I'll keep going because I'm strong, and one day I'll find my own family." Tommy laughed, but Peter didn't let it bother him. He knew Ann's words were true. He had the ability to overcome challenges, even if they were difficult. Over time, Peter began to open up more to the other children. He helped the younger ones, offered advice and support, and slowly began to earn the respect of others. Ann's words became a mantra for him, a constant reminder of his own strength. Anne was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. The pain was so intense that she dropped the spoon she was holding and doubled over, trying to breathe deeply. "Anne, are you okay?" John ran to her side, worried. "No, John, it hurts a lot," and said in a weak voice. Without wasting time, John helped her to the car and drove quickly to the hospital. On the way, he held Anne's hand, trying to keep her calm as the pain seemed to intensify. At the hospital, Anne was quickly taken to the emergency room. John waited anxiously in the hallway, his heart heavy with worry. After a few minutes that felt like hours, a doctor appeared. "John Spencer," the doctor called. "That's me," John said, standing up anxiously. "Your wife is stable now," the doctor explained. "We will do some tests to determine the cause of the pain." John thanked him and spent the night by Anne's side, holding her hand while she slept under the effect of painkillers. The following days were an anguishing wait as Anne underwent a series of tests. Finally, after a few days, the doctor called John and Anne for a consultation. "Mr. and Mrs. Spencer, the test results showed some complications. Unfortunately, due to your condition, and you will not be able to have more children," the doctor said with a sympathetic look, and felt her world crumble around her. John held her hand tightly, trying to offer support. The way back home was silent, both immersed in their own thoughts and mourning the loss of the dream of having another child. In the following days, the house seemed shrouded in a cloud of sadness. Anne and John tried to support each other, but the pain was palpable. They spent nights talking about the future, trying to find a way to move forward. One night, while they were sitting in the living room, Anne finally broke the silence. "John, I know this is difficult for both of us, but I've been thinking a lot about Peter, the boy I met at the cemetery. He's so special, and maybe he needs us as much as we need him," Anne said in a soft voice. John looked at her, his eyes full of understanding. "I've been thinking about him too. Helping him brought a different light to you, Anne. Maybe this is our chance to have the family we've always wanted," and smiled, feeling a renewed hope. "I think we should consider adoption. Peter has already been through so much, and if we can give him a loving home, maybe it will bring healing to all of us." The sun shone brightly that morning, spreading its golden light over the orphanage. Peter was in the courtyard, helping a child fix a toy when he heard his name called by Miss Violet. "Peter, someone is here to see you," she said with an enigmatic smile. Peter felt a twinge of curiosity and ran to the orphanage entrance. When he got there, he saw Anne waiting for him with a radiant smile on her face. Beside her was a man he didn't know. His heart raced, and he ran into Anne's arms. "Anne, it's you," Peter exclaimed, his eyes shining with joy and surprise. He hadn't expected to see her again so soon. "It's me, Peter. I finally found you," Anne replied, returning the hug with tenderness. "I want to introduce you to someone very special. This is my husband, John." John knelt to be at Peter's level and extended his hand. "Hello, Peter. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, and has told me a lot about you." Peter shyly shook John's hand, feeling a mix of emotion and nervousness. "Nice to meet you, John." And then John sat with Peter on a bench in the courtyard, ready to share the big news. "Peter, we've talked a lot about you and what we want for our future," and began, her voice soft and full of emotion. "And we've decided that we want you to be part of our family. We want to adopt you." Peter looked at both of them, his eyes filling with tears of joy. "You want to adopt me? Really?" "Yes, Peter, really," John confirmed with a smile. "We want you to be our son. We know it might be a long process, but we're committed to it." Peter felt a wave of happiness flood over him. "But how will it work? What do I need to do?" And held Peter's hand with affection. "First, we will start the adoption process officially. This involves some visits and meetings with social workers to make sure we are all ready for this change. It will take some time, but during that period, we will visit you frequently. And eventually, you will come live with us," John added. "In the meantime, we want you to know that we are here for you always. We will spend a lot of time together to get to know each other better." Peter nodded, absorbing every word. "I can't wait. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, John, for giving me this chance." And John spent the day with Peter, exploring the orphanage and talking about their lives, dreams, and hopes. They played with the other children, shared snacks, and laughed together. The connection between them was palpable, and everyone who watched could see that they were destined to be a family. In the late afternoon, as the sun began to set, and John said goodbye to Peter, promising to return soon. "We will see you in a few days, Peter. Stay strong and remember that we are always thinking of you," and said, hugging him tightly. "I will, and I'll wait for you. See you soon, Anne." "See you soon, John," Peter replied, feeling more hopeful than ever. As Anne and John walked away, Peter felt an inner peace that he hadn't felt in a long time. He knew there would still be challenges, but with Anne and John by his side, he was ready to face them. The day Peter had been waiting for finally arrived. The sun shone brightly in the blue sky as he prepared to leave the orphanage. The other children gathered around, saying goodbye with hugs and words of encouragement. Miss Violet was there with tears in her eyes, but a smile on her face. "We will miss you, Peter. You brought so much joy to all of us," she said, hugging him. "I will miss you too, but I'm so happy. Thank you for everything, Miss Violet," Peter replied, holding back tears of emotion. And John were waiting at the entrance of the orphanage with warm smiles and open arms. Peter ran to them, feeling indescribable happiness. "Ready to go home, son?" John asked, his eyes shining. "Yes, I'm ready," Peter replied with a radiant smile. They went together to Peter's new home. Upon entering, Peter was greeted with a surprise. His room was decorated with everything he liked. There were toys, books, and even a photo of his mother in a beautiful frame, carefully placed on the shelf. "We want you to feel at home here, Peter," and said, watching the boy's reaction. Peter looked at the photo of his mother and smiled, feeling finally at peace. "I already feel at home, and..." The days that followed were full of joy and discoveries. Peter quickly adapted to his new school, where he made many friends. And John supported him every step of the way, actively participating in his school and extracurricular life. There was laughter at family meals, weekend adventures, and quiet nights of bedtime stories. Peter felt loved and safe, something he had longed for. But he never forgot his mother, Maria, and he never forgot her son, Michael. They carried these memories in their hearts, knowing they were part of who they were and the family they had become. One day, Anne and Peter decided to visit the cemetery where they met. They walked side by side to the graves of Maria and Michael, bringing flowers to honor their memories. "This place has special meaning for us, doesn't it?" and said, placing flowers on Michael's grave. "Yes, it does. It was here that I found you, Anne. And somehow, I think my mom and your son brought us together," Peter replied, placing flowers on his mother's grave, and nodded, tears in her eyes. "I feel that too, Peter. Michael and your mother will always be part of our lives, and I'm so grateful we found each other." They stood in silence for a moment, respecting the solemnity of the place and reflecting on their journeys. "I miss my mom a lot, but I know she's happy for me," Peter said, looking at Maria's grave. "And I'm happy we found each other, and hugged Peter, feeling the depth of the bond they shared. "I'm happy too, Peter. We are a family now, and we will always remember those we love." Together, they left the cemetery, knowing the future was bright. Peter, Anne, and John formed a united family, full of love and hope, ready to face any challenge life presented. And despite the losses, they found comfort and joy in the new life they built together. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment, and check out our next story.